Hey, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat, late night conversation. So let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Now, the way these streams work is I give my opening remarks, followed by a roll call where we find out who's watching, who's on the other side of the camera. And then after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the program, if you're watching on Rumble, send me a Rumble rant. We've already got one from Troglodyte. Or if you're watching on YouTube, send me a super chat. If you're watching on Facebook, I cannot see the Facebook stream. So the best way to send in questions is on YouTube or on Rumble. That's the best way to do it. That's the way we do things. Now, couple announcements. Really only one announcement tonight, which is that every morning on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel, we have a morning message. Start your day with revolutionary hope and optimism. I've got the link to the morning message right here in the chat. That's the one that's queued up for tomorrow. We had a great morning message this morning from Gabby, which I will be playing later in the stream. Absolutely a tremendous message. But folks, not only do I encourage you to tune in every morning and watch the morning messages, but I would like you to make morning messages. We urgently need more people to make morning messages. I know it's not easy, but it's really quite easy. All I need you to do is take one of our books, take a CPI book or another book that you find to be very inspiring, and you can read us a paragraph out of it for your morning message, or read a page out of it for your morning message. You don't have to do something really elaborate. Morning messages can be done however you want to do them, but we do need people to make more morning messages because we need to keep engaged. We need to keep this community interactive. We need people to be engaging with each other. So this is the link to make morning messages. Submit a morning message. You go to that link, and then you can record it with your phone and upload it. It sends it straight to our YouTube channel. Go and make a morning message. If you have not recorded a morning message, we ask that you do so. We really need people to make morning messages so that we have a morning message from every person or from different people every morning. We got to keep this community engaged. I'm going to show the morning message from today that was really great. There's a new one lined up for tomorrow. It's actually a song tomorrow. I'm not going to give away who did it or whatever, but tomorrow's morning message, someone actually wrote a song. It is an original song that somebody is doing, but you can do it however you want. Just read, talk, whatever you feel is best. But we do need people to listen to the morning messages as a way to stay engaged. And we also need people to make morning messages. We need to keep engaged with this community. We need other people to step up to the plate and make morning messages. So please make a morning message, and that would be great. So the way we do things here on this channel, for those of you who may not be familiar, first I give my opening remarks. Then after that, we do the roll call. And then after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if you have something you would like to talk about in the second half of our show, please send a super chat question or a Rumble rant question, and I will do my best to answer it. So that's the way it works. I'm going to start my opening remarks now. friends, viewers, supporters, haters, and lurkers. All of you who may be watching this, I want you to get clear on a few things. Now, when I talk about the people watching this, the way this generally works on this YouTube channel is you've got a layer of people that are members of CPI or close friends that watch every channel. Those are the people I would call fans, friends, activists. Those are our people. And then there's also a layer of people who watch these streams who don't like me for whatever reason. They don't agree with me. They are attracted to some fandom on the internet that is turned against us or whatever. And there's people that watch these streams but don't like me. I don't know why they do that to themselves, right? If I didn't like somebody, I wouldn't watch them, right? But there are some people who are haters who watch these streams. And lurkers. There's a lot of those folks. There are people who watch these streams but are silent. They don't leave comments on the YouTube, on the channel. They don't participate in the chat. They just kind of watch silently. They absorb the message. They find it educational, entertaining, but they don't really want to get involved. They want to remain anonymous. They're the lurkers. And all are welcome, right? Hate watchers are welcome. Obviously, our community, who this stream is for, are welcome. And even the hate watchers are welcome. Even the lurkers are welcome, right? We do these streams for everybody. These streams are up there for everybody to see, and I keep doing them. And I really appreciate doing them, and especially the people that are in the chats every night. I really value you, and I really value being able to engage with you. I really value being able to spread the knowledge that I have and that I know on these streams. So we have a variety of people who watch these streams for different reasons. And we do them very often, right? We do them, almost every night I'm on here. We do them consistently. We have certain themes we come back to. We have certain positions that we take. And what we do here is very special, and I really value all of you. So everyone who's listening, fans, friends, comrades, lurkers, haters, all of you, I think it's about time we clarified a few things. Because it can get a little bit messy and confusing. Can get more than a little bit messy and confusing now. It used to be that nobody talked about the ideas that I espoused on these streams. They were obscure and niche. Now there's a lot of confusion in society, and a lot of people are talking about the kind of things that we talk about on these streams. And it's about time that we just clarified a few things and just made it clear what we mean by certain words and what the focus should be. We need to make that clear because there's a lot of confusion about that. And if you are new, which I really hope you are, I really hope that people watching this are new people are who I want to talk to. If you are new, it can be very, very confusing. It can be extremely confusing because there's a lot of people talking about these ideas and concepts in ways that are very, very different from the way that I talk about them. So let's just get down to business. Let's get down to business. What is capitalism? What does the word mean? Because there's a lot of confusion about it. I have heard many different definitions of capitalism. One definition of capitalism that I've heard all my life is that capitalism is when you have money. It's owning stuff. And that's a definition you hear from a lot of Americans that think they like capitalism because they're like, I like owning stuff. I own my house. I'm a capitalist. I own my car. I'm a capitalist. Well, wrong. That's not what the word means. And now you also get definitions of capitalism that are less positive, but they're still wrong. I've heard people say capitalism means income inequality. It means that some people have more of an income than other people. That is not what capitalism means. I've heard people say that capitalism is when the government works for the very rich. It's like that's technically not what capitalism means. That happens in a capitalist society, sure, but that's not what the word actually means. The definition of capitalism, or at least the one that we use on this stream, and the one that we have popularized over the past few years, the one that you will find in our manual, We Are City Builders. Capitalism is production organized for profit. Frederick Engels, he said, under capitalism, the means of production function only as preliminary transformation into capital. The means of production function only as preliminary transformation into capital. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that we don't, this shirt was not made for any other reason than money could be made off of it. The factory where this shirt was made assembled the materials, the shirt was created, it was then taken to a store and sold for money, and that's the whole reason it was created. It was preliminary transformation into capital. There was a capitalist who had some money, and he wanted to make more money. So he started a company that made shirts, and he hired some people, and he got some materials together, and they made the shirts, and the shirts were sold, and the little bit of money he started out with became more money. Preliminary transformation into capital. We don't have roads. I'm sorry, better example. We don't have food so people can eat it. We have food because agribusiness and big box stores and corporations like Kraft and Nestle and Coca-Cola need to make money. We don't have homes to live in. I'm sitting here in an apartment. Was this building built because I needed a place to stay? Of course not. It was built because the land was owned by a capitalist, and the capitalist wanted to make more money from his land, and so he built an apartment building on top of it and then started renting it out in order to make more money. Right? This apartment building was constructed as preliminary transformation into capital. A more simple way of putting it is that profits are in command. And that's how Mao put it in the little red book and in other places. Mao described the capitalist system as profits are in command. It is an economy where everything happens in order to generate profit for private owners. You have a group of private owners who have money, and they set up a whole apparatus that is designed to bring them more money, right? They have money, so they start an airline. People get on the airline. People buy tickets to the airline. Airline workers are hired, and that results in them having more money. Right? There's many examples of this. But capitalism is an economy where profits are in command. And that's why people who think that the issue is worker cooperatives are missing the point. Let's say you had a company where the workers were also the shareholders. Well, that might be more fair because they're getting a share of what they produce. Instead of getting a wage, they're getting a share of the profit. It may be more egalitarian, but they're still trying to maximize profit. At the end of the day, the company starts out with a certain amount of money, and then production is carried out. And at the end of the day, they need more money. So it's still production according to profit. And that company, even though it may be egalitarian, even though the profits may be shared, if it's going to survive in the market, it needs to compete with other companies, and it needs to expand production, and it has to increase its profits. It has to do what is profitable, even if those profits are shared. So worker cooperatives, as long as they are functioning within a market, as long as they are trying to increase their profits and the return on their investment, are still capitalism. Capitalism is a society where profits are in command. It is an economy based on preliminary transformation of the means of production. And this is a really important point because there's so much confusion about it, right? And what about the government? And people say, well, if the government is involved, then it becomes socialism. No. Every capitalist society that has ever existed has had a government that builds roads. Why does the government build roads? Is that communism? No. It's because that facilitates the market. In order for people to drive to the stores and buy the products of capitalists, in order for workers to drive to work and sell their labor power to capitalists, in order for capitalists to transport the products that they produce, there's got to be roads. And so the state facilitates the market by building roads. The U.S. Constitution requires that a postal service be in existence. And why is that? Is it because the U.S. government's communist and it wants to have a government monopoly? No, it's because if there's only private delivery mechanisms, that doesn't facilitate the market very well. And it's necessary that there be a government that oversees the mailing of postage and the delivering of messages, etc. That's important. And the reason that it is important is because that is a way to facilitate the market. Postage, mailing, is a really big part of facilitating the market. And there's always a state to facilitate the capitalist market. The post office is not socialism. The roads are not socialism. Socialism is not the government doing stuff. And I've never maintained that. I've always said that that is not what socialism is. Socialism is not worker cooperatives that function according to profit. And socialism is not the government doing stuff. Socialism, and this is where things get interesting. Socialism is when society as a whole takes control of the economy and profits are not in command any longer. Socialism is when the means of production, the banks, the factories, the major industries, the centers of economic power, are forced to work in the interest of society as a whole and not simply operating to maximize profit for private owners. Socialism is the negation of capitalism. It is a society where profits are no longer in command. It is a society in which the people, the population overall, as a group, has seized control of the means of production. And those two definitions are extremely important because nowadays people think socialism is the redistribution of income. Well, that happens in every society to some degree or other. The roads in my city are paid for with taxes. And those taxes are the redistribution of income to pay for the roads. Does that mean that it's socialism? No. I mean, every society in history redistributes wealth. Every society in history has the government carry out certain functions. Some societies are more free market than others. Some societies have more of a welfare state that provides benefits to the population, but that is not the difference between capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is profits in command. Socialism is society as a group controlling the means of production. But, gets a little more complicated. because we don't live in the era of ordinary capitalism. We live in the era of imperialism, which is capitalism in its monopolistic stage. Starting in the 1880s, 1890s, we developed a period where banks became dominant over industries. Gigantic corporations based in the Western countries began spreading their tentacles all across the world. Instead of exporting products, we now had a situation where there was the export of capital, where the corporations themselves started spreading all over the world, and banks became dominant. There was the emergence of what Lenin called an international financial oligarchy. Big bankers sat at the center of big trusts, cartels, and syndicates, big groups of corporations that functioned as monopolies. And these monopolies began spreading out all over the world, seizing territory, seizing parts of the world as theirs. And when you had the export of capital, when Africa and Asia and Latin America became dominated by Western corporations, this prevented them from developing. This kept them in a state of underdevelopment. It prevented them from building their own industries, their own development. It led to a situation where the country was held under the grip of foreign corporations, and its ability to lift itself up out of poverty, develop its own economy, was restricted. And this is capitalism in its monopolistic stage of imperialism. It's not individual capitalists controlling the economy of one country. It is ultra-wealthy capitalists in Western countries dominating the entire world. That's capitalism in its monopoly stage. And then that raises the question, what does that mean for socialism, right? Socialism and capitalism are at odds with one another in the classical understanding, right? In the regular classical capitalist industrial economy, the capitalists own the factories. The bulk of society are workers who work in the factories. The capitalists control the government and own the government and use the government for their own ends. The workers are oppressed. The workers form labor unions. They form a mass popular movement. And socialism is that, those labor unions and that mass popular movement seizing control of the government, winning the battle for democracy, and then using the government to force the economy to work in the interests of society at all, to nationalize and make the means of production public property. And that's socialism. But imperialism makes it complicated. It makes it very complicated. It's no longer simply about the workers in an individual country getting together to push back against the power of the capitalists. It's about a global struggle. And as those corporations in America and Britain and France and Germany were becoming imperialists, as they were becoming imperialistic monopolies, in order to spread themselves all over the world, they needed to have peace at home. And some of the workers in France and Germany and Britain and America benefited from imperialism. Not all the workers, but some of them. And because those corporations were spreading their tentacles all over the world, they weren't just making profits, they were making super profits. And the workers of the colonized and oppressed countries, they were not just exploited, they were super exploited. But with their super profits that the imperialists were making, they could afford to buy off some of the workers at home and give them a more comfortable life. And the main way they did it was with reformist socialist parties, reformist socialist movements. A section of the socialist movement stopped struggling to overthrow the capitalists and simply saw its job as facilitating more of a welfare state at home. And these reformist elements, who fought for things that were very noble, fought for the minimum wage, fought for public education, fought for health care benefits and all of that, they weren't doing this because they wanted to overthrow the capitalists. They were doing this because they wanted the capitalist society at home to be more stable so it could dominate the world. And that in order to have imperialism, you needed a layer of people in the homeland who were loyal to the empire. You needed a group of working class people who would go out there and wave the flag and support the war. You needed a group of working class people who would send their sons and daughters to go die and colonize places in Africa and Asia and Latin America. And so fake socialists became an essential part of imperialism. You could not have imperialism without fake socialists. And why are these socialists fake? Because they are not fighting to overthrow imperialism. They are fighting simply to have the government be more involved in the economy and give benefits to certain workers in order to stabilize the homeland so that the big corporations and banks in the Western countries can dominate the entire world. Social imperialists, social democracy. This wing of the socialist and communist movement has always played this role. Their job is to make imperialism work better by making sure that some of the super profits get redistributed and making sure you have class peace at home by giving some of the working class benefits that buy their loyalty to empire. Now, that's very confusing, but imperialism, monopolistic capitalism, needs fake socialists. And around the world, countries are struggling against imperialism. The imperialists are keeping Africa poor. They're keeping Asia poor. They're keeping Latin America poor. But they're not just keeping the workers of Latin America poor. And they're not just keeping the workers of Africa poor. And they're not just keeping the workers of Asia poor. They also are keeping the capitalists of Africa poor. And they're keeping the capitalists of Asia poor. And they're keeping the capitalists of Latin America poor. Because they don't want competition. And when they hold back development in these oppressed countries, they're not simply holding back a workers' revolution. They're holding back capitalism. They don't want wealthy people to emerge in Africa that are making profits. They want the profits from Africa's natural resources to go into their pockets. They don't want wealthy Asians to emerge to make profits from the wealth and labor of Asia. They want all the wealth and labor of Asia to go into their pockets. And many of the people who oppose imperialism around the world are capitalists. They're capitalists who are against the imperialist monopolies. However, they're too weak. They are too weak to fight the ultra monopolies. And we've learned over the course of the 20th century that the only way that nations can be free from imperialism is with socialism. And in fact, the way that socialism has come into the world has not been workers in Western countries getting together and seizing their factories and seizing control of the government. Instead, it has been countries in the colonized world who are dominated by the imperialists. The working class, the peasantry, and even the capitalists of third world countries deciding that their whole country needs to be free from imperialism. So they bond together and they form a revolutionary anti-imperialist movement. And their revolutionary anti-imperialist movement puts the working class and the peasantry into motion, but it has some capitalists aligned with it. And it is a movement of national liberation that kicks out the imperialists and then builds a socialist economy. On the Chinese flag, you have one big star that represents the Chinese Communist Party, and then you have 4 other stars. And those 4 other stars are the block of 4 great classes: the workers, the peasants, the urban capitalists, and the national bourgeoisie. And these are 4 groups of people, including the capitalists of China, all who are getting the shit kicked out of them by the imperialists. And so the Communist Party brought this block of 4 great classes together, formed an alliance to kick out the imperialists. And every socialist revolution that has ever happened has been an anti-imperialist revolution. The Cuban Revolution, the Korean Revolution, the Eastern European countries that have had socialism, Libya under the leadership of Gaddafi, Bolivarian socialism in Latin America, Ba'athist Arab socialism. It hasn't been a pure workers' struggle to seize their factory. It has been a national struggle against imperialism. And those national capitalists, those capitalists who are against the imperialists, they can be a very, very important part of an anti-colonial movement. And I've pointed out many times on these streams, after the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks had a conference in Baku in Azerbaijan. And they invited all kinds of people from all over Asia and all over the Middle East. And they said, as long as you're fighting the British Empire, we'll work with you. They supported the Emir of Afghanistan, who was a conservative monarchist. Why did they support the Emir of Afghanistan? Because he was fighting the imperialists. He was a monarchist. There were capitalists who were fighting the imperialists. That was fine. And they didn't support the fake socialists of the Western countries. They said they were socialists. They said they wanted to give everyone free health care. They said that but they were supporting imperialism. In our time, the issue is not, are you a capitalist or are you a socialist? The issue is, are you for this dying system of imperialism or are you against it? That is the issue in our time. And this is something that many fools cannot understand. Many fools, think that they got me because I've said we're not against capitalism. We're against imperialism. Well, actually, if you read Lenin, that makes sense. The Chinese communists aligned with the national bourgeoisie of their homeland, the national capitalists, in order to defeat imperialism. And today, capitalists are an essential part of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In Cuba, Fidel Castro aligned with many national capitalists to drive out American imperialism. And today, in Cuba, there are many capitalists and small business owners that are an essential part of Cuban socialism. We are not against someone opening a store. We are not against somebody starting their own restaurant. We are not against somebody starting a small business. And in fact, in socialist countries, the state that controls the economy goes out of its way to help capitalists. You go to China, you go to Vietnam, you go to Cuba, you go to Nicaragua, the government goes out of its way to help these capitalists help build up their economy. They have a centrally planned economy. Society controls the means of production, but some of those means of production that are regulated and controlled by all of society are privately owned, are the ideas of creative people, of entrepreneurs, right? And because they are trying to defeat imperialism, and because they are building up a planned economy, a socialist economy to defeat the imperialists, small business owners are part of 21st century socialism. Meanwhile, one thing we don't support is fake socialists. In Britain, one of the main political parties, the ruling political party in Britain, is a socialist party. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is a socialist. But he's a socialist who gives billions of British people's taxpayer money to Israel so they can murder the Palestinians. He's a socialist who is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. He is a socialist who is helping preside over the impoverishment of people in Africa and Latin America. And he might call himself a socialist, and he might say he's for the working man, and he might even provide benefits. They have a national health care service. It doesn't fucking matter because he's an imperialist. So even if he says he's for socialism, even if he wants to redistribute the imperialist super profits in a more egalitarian way, even if he says he's against racism, even if he sings the Internationale, it doesn't matter because he's an imperialist. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they say they're against communism, they're against Marxism, they are conservative Shia Muslims. But in order to defeat the imperialists, they've had to create basically a centrally planned economy. The largest economic entity in Iran is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the government controls the oil, and the government controls the major industries, and they have these neighborhood assemblies called Basij councils that carry out the goals of the revolution on a local level. And Iran might say, oh, we hate communism, we hate socialism, but the reality is they are fighting the imperialists. The reality is their best friend is Russia, their best friend is China, their best friend is Venezuela, their best friend is Cuba and Nicaragua, their best friend is Vietnam, and they might say they're against socialism, but they're fighting the imperialists, and if you fight the imperialists, you more or less have to become a socialist. And that's the point. I have no loyalty to anybody because they say, I am a communist, I am a socialist. There's loads of clowns out there who support imperialism who think they're socialists. Why would any self-respecting anti-imperialist, anyone who comes from the tradition of Lenin and Marx and all of that, have any loyalty to somebody just because they say, I'm a socialist? The whole point of Lenin, you read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. You read the Critique and the Fall of the Second International. You read Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. The whole point he's making is that if you are for imperialism, you ain't a fucking socialist. And on top of that, he says that if you're fighting the imperialists, I don't care if you're the emir of Afghanistan, I don't care if you're a Shia Muslim, I don't care what you call yourself. You could be a capitalist, you can be a monarchist, but if you're fighting the imperialists, you're on our side because imperialism is the main enemy. That is the movement that is saving the world right now. That is the movement that brought us the BRICS. That is the movement that broke China free from being the sick man of Asia and turned it into the second largest economy in the world. That is the movement that made Russia a superpower, that defeated the Nazis and invented space travel. That's the movement that made Cuba what it is today and raised people out of poverty and created the world's greatest medical school. That's the movement that eradicated poverty all throughout Nicaragua and has built a strong, prosperous economy in a Central American country that used to be under the grip of the imperialists. That is the movement that raised the people of Iran up and made them proud of their homeland again and built a modern economy and lifted so many people out of poverty in Iran. That's the movement that produced the Houthis that are standing up and fighting back against Israel and shaking the whole world. People from the poorest country in the world that are standing up and fighting back, people of the land. And at this point, probably the majority of anti-imperialists don't identify with the word communism. And a lot of them do. It's probably about 50-50. In China, they certainly do. In Vietnam, they certainly do. And in Cuba, they certainly do. But in Latin America, the anti-imperialists, they use the term Bolivarian socialism. In Nicaragua, they are explicitly Christian in their government. They have Christianity in their constitution. Their slogan is Christianity, Socialism, and Solidarity. In Iran, they are Shia Muslims. In Yemen, they are Shia Muslims. It's complicated. But many of the anti-imperialists around the world do not identify with communism or Marxism-Leninism. The Chinese do, but the Russians don't. The Russians don't call themselves that. That's part of their heritage. They're very proud of everything that the Soviet Union did. And they very much consider the fall of the Soviet Union to be a devastating moment in the history of their country. But at this point, the Russians say, no, we're not the Soviet Union anymore. Well, that doesn't matter. They're opposing the imperialists. And as they oppose the imperialists, they become more and more socialistic. And so that doesn't matter. Meanwhile, in the last decade, it used to be that nobody in America ever called themselves a socialist. Being a socialist in America meant you were like from the planet Saturn. From about the 1950s until about 10 years ago, nobody in America ever called themselves a socialist. It was like the worst thing you could ever be, to be a socialist. Well, out of the blue, thanks to Bernie Sanders and some others, now there's a bunch of people walking around America going, I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. Oh boy, I'm a socialist. Ye golly, I'm a socialist. You know, I got me a socialist hat and I got me some socialist shoes and I read me some socialist books. I got a socialist college professor and gee golly, I'm a socialist. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I am. And there's a lot of people walking around like that. But the overwhelming majority of those people, they might say, gee golly, you know, I'm a socialist, yeah? They might say that. But they support the Nazis in Ukraine fighting against Russia. They want to tear down China. They support Israel murdering the Palestinians. They think Venezuela is a brutal dictatorship. They think Nicaragua is a brutal dictatorship. They hate the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it doesn't fucking matter. They can say, oh, you know, I call myself a socialist, but what? It doesn't matter. That's the point. You can call yourself whatever you want. But if you're for imperialism, you are on the wrong side. And on top of that, you can call yourself whatever you want. But if you're against imperialism, you are on the right side. And what in the 20th century called itself communism Marxism-Leninism in the 20th century represented a global movement against imperialism. That's what Marxism-Leninism represented. But even starting in the 60s and 70s, it started to change. You had African socialism with Kwame Nkrumah. You had Ba'athist Arab socialism. Eventually, you had the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Marxism-Leninism in the 20th century was the global anti-imperialist movement. Now it's gotten much more complicated. But imperialism is still the enemy, and anti-imperialism is still the future. And that's what it's all about. And especially now, in anti-imperialist countries, national capitalists, capitalists that are loyal to the homeland, capitalists that are opposed to imperialism, capitalists that align with a socialist government that controls the means of production, are an essential part of it. So we are in a period where it doesn't make sense, internationally or domestically, to fight to own the word communism. It doesn't make any sense to fight to own the word communism, because what are you owning? What are you owning? We are anti-imperialists. We are opposed to imperialism. We align with the forces around the world that oppose imperialism. And our job is to tell the working people in the American country and in the imperialist countries that their real enemy is at home, that their real enemy is not Iran or Russia or China. Their real enemy is on Wall Street. Their real enemy is the big banks who dominate, and that we have a common enemy and a common interest with the people of the world that are struggling against imperialism. And that ultimately we seek to build an anti-monopoly coalition to unite all here in the United States that are opposed to the monopolistic and imperialist corporations. That includes small business owners. That includes, unemployed people. That includes homeless people. That includes factory workers. That includes all kinds of different people. We seek to build an anti-monopoly coalition. And what we need here in the United States is a socialist government, but in the way we understand it, an anti-imperialist government. A government that fights for you and me against Jeff Bezos and against the big bankers and against the big monopolies. We don't want a government that helps the big monopolies dominate the world and gives us a bigger chunk of it. No, we want to kick Jeff Bezos' ass. We want to destroy ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. We want a government of action that will fight for working families. We want a government that doesn't send people across the world to kill and die for big monopolies, but instead hires all the young people and all the unemployed and underemployed people to rebuild this country, to lift up the parts of this country that have been economically devastated. That is what we are fighting for. We want a government of action that will fight for working families, that will control the means of production, that will rescue our country from the imperialists, and will control the means of production in order to economically benefit all of us and rationally organize the economy so that growth and expansion and living standards can continue to rise and our children can enjoy a better life. What we are fighting for is socialism, in the sense that China has it, in the sense that Venezuela and Cuba has it, in the sense that Iran may not call it that, but that's what they have, in the sense that Russia may not call it that, but that's what they have. We are fighting for an anti-monopoly government that controls the means of production and works on behalf of all of society, including capitalists, small business owners, people who own a bar or a restaurant in their neighborhood, people who invent a new tech idea, a new innovation in computers, people that perform a useful service, that they innovate as entrepreneurs. We're not against capitalists in our struggle to have an economy where profits are not in command. We are not against business owners and capitalists being part of an overall planned economy. And this is how we understand socialism. Socialism is anti-imperialism. Socialism is defeating the power of the big monopolies, and in order to do it, having a government that fights on behalf of the people against the big monopolies. A government of action that fights for working families, that creates a planned economy in order to ensure economic growth. And our understanding is that after there has been enough economic growth, after hundreds of years of economic growth, no longer restrained by the irrationality of capitalism, that we can have a world with so much wealth and so much abundance that the need for a government will fade away, that labor will become life's prime want and no longer a necessity. People will work because they want to not be bored, because they want to enjoy creating something. And that there'll be enough to go around. No one will ever feel a need to hoard anything. And that social hierarchies will melt away. Everyone will pretty much be equal because there's so much to go around. No one's hoarding from anyone else. And the need for the state will fade away. And that is the ultimate vision of what Marx called the higher stage of communism. A stateless, classless world based on vast abundance. But in order to get it, you have to get rid of profits in command. You have to have a government that controls the economy in order to make sure there is growth. Because capitalism is the only system in history where poverty is created by abundance. In all the systems of the past, people were hungry because there was not enough food. It is only under capitalism that people become hungry because there is too much food. In systems of the past, people were homeless because there was not enough housing. But only under capitalism do people become homeless because there is too much housing. And I am so tired of hearing about a housing shortage. There is no housing shortage in America. I live in New York City where there are 4 empty apartment units for every homeless person. There is no housing shortage in America. There's capitalism. That's the problem. There's landlords who make profit without people living in the apartment. There's real estate speculation. There is no housing shortage. In this vast country, we've got loads of homes. We've got loads of apartment buildings. We have got housing out the wazoo here in America. But it's privately owned, and the access to it is restricted by the irrationality of the market and the monopolistic power of big corporations. We do not have a housing shortage. We have a housing abundance. And it is this abundance of housing that is creating skyrocketing rent and homelessness rising all across our cities. That's not rational. And in no other system would this even be possible. Capitalism is the system where people are hungry because there is too much food, where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people go cold in the wintertime because there is too much heating gas. I've told the story, and I want to tell it over and over and over again, of the little boy who says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" The father says, "Because I can't afford to buy any coal to heat the stove." And the boy says, "Father, why can't you buy any coal to heat the stove?" He says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine." And he says, why did you lose your job at the coal mine? And he says, because there is too much coal. That's the capitalist system. And that is why you need a government of action to control the centers of economic power, to control the banks and the credit strings, to control the natural resources, to have an economic development plan, to facilitate where corporations go. You need a state to control the means of production. You need society to control the banks, factories, and industries, so that you don't have the irrationality of poverty created by abundance. This is what we believe. And that what we are going through right now is something that has happened many times before in human history. Let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you about Arg the caveman. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Arg the caveman. And Arg the caveman was a really, really good hunter. Arg, every time he saw a deer, Arg was really fast, and he would run after the deer, and he would kill the deer. And Arg had a wife, and Arg's wife was a really good gatherer. Anytime there were any berries, she knew where to find them. She could dig up roots that were edible. She knew where to find them. She knew exactly what plants to eat and what plants not to eat. She was a really good gatherer. And they had children, and they were really good at hunting and gathering. They could throw sticks and rocks and kill animals and eat them, and they could eat fruits and nuts and plants, and they were really, really good at it. But one day, they got too good at it. And there weren't any more animals to kill. And there weren't any fruits and nuts to gather. And they said, oh shit, we've got a problem. We've got a problem. So what did they do? What did they do? Did they say, oh no, it's overpopulation, and line up half their kids and kill them? No. Did they say, oh, growth is bad. If only we were worse at hunting and gathering. That's the problem. We need to starve ourselves for 5 days. No. They said, you know what? We have to change the way we do it. And they started growing their own crops. And they started domesticating animals. Because their human creative power, because they had mastered hunting and gathering so well, they'd gotten so good at hunting and gathering, human creative power had outstripped the narrow limits of the hunter-gatherer mode of production. So they had to move to a higher mode of production. So out of hunter-gatherer civilization came a higher mode of production called agriculture. And that's the way humans solve these problems. And a couple thousand years later, the same kind of thing was happening in feudalism. There were food shortages, the population had expanded, there was all kinds of technology that was coming in from the Silk Road, from Asia, and all of that. And so there was a huge explosion, and feudalism was replaced by capitalism. Well, it's that time of the millennium again. Capitalism has become outmoded. And capitalism in its monopolistic stage, in its imperialist stage, has become outmoded. And human creativity and human creative power has expanded beyond the narrow limits of the irrational capitalist system. Just like Arg and his wife got too good at hunting and gathering, we have gotten way too good at technology. Artificial intelligence, we're close to self-driving cars. I mean, we can, and that's good. But in order to keep developing, In order to further unleash human creative power, we must move to a higher mode of production. And that is what is going on in society at this time. Because when it really gets down to it, we human beings are special. What separates humans from animals? What makes us different? There's one difference, which is that every other species merely interacts with its environment. But we, humans, we force the environment to serve us. And this was something that Marx and Engels discovered in their essay on the role of labor in the transition from ape to man. But it's something that you can find in the Bible. I will pull it up for you. You can find this in the book of Genesis in the Bible. I will put it on the screen. This is something that human beings have always known. There's always been something that separates us from animals. And I'm going to put it on the screen so that you can see it. Because this is the essence of who we are. Right? This is Genesis 1 verses 26 verses 28. It says, God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth on the earth. Now you notice it doesn't just say you're in charge of the earth. It says, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. Meaning take what is there and make it bigger. Take what you see around you and figure out how to make more of it and how to expand your population, to multiply, how to be fruitful, how to get more out of it, and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over all of it. When it really gets down to it, this is what it means to be a human being. You have within you something very, very beautiful. Something very, very beautiful. You have creativity within you. You have creativity within you. God is the creator of all things. And you have a piece of godlike power within you, which is called creativity. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But we human beings have something special within us. We have a soul. Right? In the CPI manual, We Are City Builders, I want to point something out to you. Right, this is our first original textbook. In the very beginning, there's a picture of Socrates. And that is the philosopher Socrates, the great thinker of ancient Greece. And he got the death penalty. They said that he was spreading misinformation, that he was corrupting the youth of Athens. And they sentenced him to death because he was spreading malign foreign influence and hurting people's faith in the great democratic institutions of ancient Athens. I'm, of course, being facetious. But yes, they gave Socrates the death penalty. And as Socrates was awaiting death, he gave a beautiful dialogue to his followers called the Phaedo. Right? And I would encourage you to go read the Phaedo, because in the Phaedo, which was transcribed by Plato, Socrates is quoted as giving his lecture on the difference between the soul and the body. And this is heavy stuff. But he argues that humans have a body and a soul, and that the soul is the creative, godlike part of us. And the body is the animalistic part, right? Your body shits, your body fucks, your body, farts, your body gets hungry. Your body is just kind of doing natural processes. But beyond your body, you have a soul. And your soul is what separates you from being an animal. Your soul has creativity, and your soul has a connection to the divine. And Socrates is saying that he is looking forward to death because it will mean the separation of the soul from the body. His soul will be liberated from his body. And that his ability to develop his mind, his creativity as a philosopher, will greatly expand because his soul is no longer attached to his body. Go and read the Phaedo. And what Socrates is celebrating, and he's pointing out in that dialogue, is that we have creative power. We have a godlike quality to us. We are creative creatures. We are not just our bodies. Animals are just their bodies. We are our bodies and our souls. And that these are two different things. You have your soul, your mind, and your body. And that these two are in conflict with each other. But he argues that when he dies, his soul will be liberated from his body, and his ability to be a philosopher and understand the world around him will greatly expand. Well, as much as Karl Marx was an atheist and wouldn't have agreed with that necessarily, when you read what they observed about human beings who force the environment to serve them, you are reading an understanding that we have a creative power. We have this spark of life, this godlike creative power within us. That's why Plato's Phaedo is one of the most beautiful dialogues I've ever read. And that's why, as someone with a Marxist background, I am religious, because I see in Marx's own teaching. In Marx's own teaching, I can see the proof of the existence of the divine, and why human beings are special, and why we are able to constantly reinvent our relationship with nature, and why we can reach a higher stage of development, and why we are creative, and why all of this is happening. No other species is doing what we're doing. The ants didn't have ant-feudalism for a while, and then they had ant-capitalism, and then they have ant-communism. No, ants have been doing it the same way but the reason that we human beings are going through stages, and the reason that we're learning to treat each other better at each stage, we're recognizing each other's rights more at each stage, we're learning to have empathy more at each stage. The reason that we're working things out is because we were created for a purpose. Right? We were created for a purpose. And as human beings, we are constantly trying to reach a higher mode of production, a higher state of existence, a higher population, a higher life expectancy, and a higher connection to God. And that God ultimately has a plan for human beings. Right? Ultimately, we are being tested for something even greater than we can imagine. We are going through a process. The existence of human beings on Earth is a process where we are being tested, we are being challenged, we are being taught, we are learning for ourselves certain things that only our Creator has known before. And this is all a very, very beautiful thing. This is all a very beautiful thing. And if you can embrace it, and if you can look at the struggles of today as the world reaching more and more of a state of perfection, and we human beings learning how to overcome our weaknesses and how to be more creative and learning how to master our environment more, if you can understand that that's what we're doing, we human beings, generation after generation, are on a journey that our Creator put us on to test us and teach us something, because He has something even better planned for us once we get it all figured out. If you can understand that, you can find a level of peace. A level of peace. And this may sound a little bit weird and wacky and new agey, but this is how I understand the world. And if I just called myself a communist, if I just went around saying I'm a communist, I would be limiting what I have to teach you. Because we've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot. And I have so much more to teach you than just Soviet ML. That we are developing a mode of understanding here that is astronomically powerful. That is a celebration of human creative power. It is a celebration of our Creator who created us and set us on this mission. It is an optimistic worldview that understands that we're reaching a higher state of perfection. That all the trials we face today are simply challenges to make us stronger and better and more effective. And so what I'm teaching you is a struggle to create a stateless, classless world of vast abundance? Sure. It's a struggle against imperialism. It is a celebration of human creative power. And it is what they are doing in the anti-imperialist countries of the world. It is what the bulk of the planet that has broken out of the domination of imperialism is striving to do, to expand the population, to increase living standards, to eradicate poverty. But if I were simply calling it communism, I would be doing you all a disservice. And especially now, there's a bunch of jokers running around calling themselves communists, jokers who support imperialism, jokers who, hate anti-imperialist countries, jokers that are, I don't know what they're doing. They're doing a lot of silly things. And because communism is associated with a lot of things that we don't believe in. We don't believe in pessimism. We don't believe in destruction. We don't celebrate the eternal rebellion. We don't celebrate the aesthetic of the French Revolution and the guillotine. We don't want vengeance. We're not in this to unleash our sexual, drive and just shoot our sex drive all over everything. All right? We're not motivated by a desire to take revenge against people who are privileged and punish them. And because of that, it makes no sense to just hold on to, we're communists. Makes no sense. Why not give the beautiful thing that we are doing here a unique, beautiful name? Our organization is the Center for Political Innovation. And we are innovationists. Because the essence of what we are doing is celebrating human innovation and human creative power. Innovation and creativity are the spark of divine within all of us. And they are what we are seeking to unleash by moving to a higher stage. It's expansion, it's growth, and it's what we're all about. We are innovationists. Let me repeat this. We are innovationists. We are innovationists. We've called ourselves city builders. We've called ourselves 21st century socialists. We are innovationists. What we are doing as we build an anti-imperialist movement, as we help people find their own inner voice by making morning messages, by writing, by putting on conferences and big events, as we encourage people to find a creative outlet for the passion they feel about the world around them and how it should be better, as we learn to love each other in a sense of community, as we come together to create together, as we challenge the people of our country to really imagine how things could be beyond the irrationality of the markets and the dying imperialist system. As we do all of that, we are innovationists. We are innovationists. We are innovationists. That is what we are. Everything about us, from the top of our heads to the bottom of our feet, to the tingle that we feel when it's time to go out and spread the truth, to the indignation that we feel about injustice, to the joy that we have when we teach people something new, the thrill we get when we're around each other, chanting and singing. We are innovationists. That is what we are. And I wear that name with pride. Because that name takes with us everything that I have learned in the past decade. It leaves behind some of the ugliness and some of the mistakes that have gone on in the history of our movement. It preserves what is good, what is true, and what is essential. And leaves behind the ugliness and the pessimism and the vengefulness and the libidinal, Oedipal complex behind so much of what calls itself leftism. We are breaking new ground. We are innovating. And innovationism is in itself an innovation. And we have done this together. We have done this together. You, me, all of us that are here. We have reached a new plane. We have connected with a higher force, and we are surging ahead as an organization, as a movement, as a school of thought, as an energy force, as a product of our time, as a part of the discourse that can drive us toward a whole new paradigm. We are innovationists. That is what we are. And I am proud to be an innovationist. And I am proud of the movement that we are building. And I am proud of the breakthroughs that we have made. And I'm proud to be on the right side of history. And I am proud to be connected with bigger forces around the world that believe in the exact same thing that I believe here. And I am proud to bring with me positivity. I am proud to create, not compete. I am proud to have a spiritual connection. I'm proud to be motivated by a desire to teach and build and connect and love. And I'm proud to be an innovationist. And I am proud of all of you because we all did this together. We all did this together. Innovationism is a product of all of our hard work and all of our sacrifice and all the lessons that we've learned together. This is stream number 782. 782 times we have come on here and talked. 782 times. And we've learned so much. And we've overcome so much. And we've made mistakes and we've learned from them. And we've advanced 782 times. And our audience has just kept growing. Be proud of what we have here. We are the innovationist movement. And we've already innovated, we've already expanded, and we've already grown. And you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet. So names and locations, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? All right. So we got Dan in the LA area, Frank Jagger in Orlando, Florida, William Murphy in New York, Ollie in London town, Tog in Midwest, Scott in Maryland, Brussels, Santa Ana, California, Ryan in Presley, Pasadena, JT24 in Mississippi, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, Gabby in Chicago, Ed in Louisville, Alex in Brazil, Isabel in Toronto, Carolina Iwa Stanislawa in Berlin, Luca in Singapore, Jenny in Cincinnati, Ian in Chester, England, Bob in Troy, New York. You're usually the first one, Bob. Wesley in Manchester United, Huey Long in the South, Jamie in Boise, Idaho, Rachel Winder in Georgia, Benson in North Carolina, Denver in Minnesota, Dan Keating in New Jersey. Names and locations, names and locations. Mosen from Colorado, Denver, Colorado. We Earthwide. Huey Long on the right on. Blade in London. Telwana in British Columbia. Names and locations, folks. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who's with us? All righty. Well, listen, folks, we've got 3 super chats that have come in, or 2 super chats that have come in, and 2 Rumble rants that have come in. So I will answer them. But if you have any more questions, now would be the time to send them along. But we had an exceptional morning message this morning. A really, really great morning message was delivered this morning from Gabby, who's in the chat. She did a great job with her morning message. It was from the field in Chicago. So we're just going to put it on because it's a great morning message. Anway in India. And folks, we do need more morning messages. We really do. We really need more morning messages. So, please take the time to just read from one of our books or say whatever you can say or whatever. We do need people to send morning messages. It is urgent. I am saying that having a morning message every morning is not easy, but it's what our community can do. And, I could do them all if I wanted, but that's not why we have them. We have them in order to empower people. So please take a moment to record yourself saying what is on your mind. Tell us a story, sing us a song, read from a book, do whatever you want, but submit morning messages. Please, I'm urging you, please submit a morning message. Now we'll watch a great morning message from Gabby. This was Gabby. She was out in the streets. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, beautiful morning message from Gabby. Doing the work out in the streets of Chicago. This was Gabby's morning message from today.
Good evening, CPI and CPI viewers. Morning messages that we're getting it done. We got contacts. We passed out books. I just want to say that anything's possible. We made it through the protest cage. If it weren't for me and the Chicago innovators, this would have not happened. And I'm just grateful that I got to meet a lot of people and just knowing what the issues were and connecting with them in a human level, not just politics. I think that in order to thrive as an American and as a innovationist, I believe that we should be able to connect in a human level, not just politics. We're gonna make the Midwest happen. Hopefully we'll have enough people to get stuff started in Chicago. And we have the protests in the background. This is all distraction, we just want to get people started into doing serious work like we have been doing. All of this is just a lot of distraction and a lot of people who need, spiritual wellness as well. It's not just about hate and wishing people ill will. I believe that for me personally, with the power of God, anything's possible. I hope we'll get this going, and I hope everybody could get motivated. I could motivate people into getting things started, and we did it. I think we passed out all the books, and I just have one more contact.
1,000.
1,000 1,000, Chicago members, and we did it, and we got names, and hoping to get more names, and we're gonna do it, and we're gonna win, so keep it going, keep the innovationist movement going. So shout out to everybody in CPI, and shout out to people who are interested. You won't regret if you become a member. So have a good one. Ciao.
So yes, that was a great morning message from Gabby. And we are going to have a Midwest workshop for new people, for anybody really. We're going to start promoting that in a couple weeks. But it looks like the weekend of October 11th through 13th is when we're going to be having our Midwest workshop. It'll be in the Chicago area, so we'll start promoting that soon. But if you are interested in coming, maybe start marking your calendar and getting ready for it now, because we're going to have a great workshop. We're marching forward. We are marching forward, and it's very, very exciting what we are doing. So my next trip is to Florida for the Uhuru trial. After that, who knows what's next, but October 11th through 13th, it looks like we're having a Midwest workshop where we'd like to meet new people and show them what our group is all about. So we have 2 Rumble rants that have come in, and I will answer those. Then I'll answer the super chats. If you got any more super chats or Rumble rants, please send them in, because that's the way to get me to talk. First one is from Troglodyte. He says, I've looked at Gray Zone's reporting on MEK, an anti-Iran organization with headquarters in Alabama. MEK claims to have once been communist. What do you know about MEK? Well, I actually know a lot about MEK. And MEK stands for Mujahideen Khalq, which means the People's Holy Warriors. The People's Holy Warriors. Mujahideen are holy warriors. Khalq is people. And so they're the Mujahideen of the people. They're the holy warriors of the people. And they started out, so in Iran, at the time of the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, you had 3 major communist parties. They were one of them. The biggest communist party was called the Tudeh Party, which was the Soviet-aligned Communist Party, the Tudeh Party of Iran. And they were the Soviet-aligned Communist Party. They ran the trade unions in most of the cities, and they had been around for many decades. They'd been big supporters of Mossadegh, the elected president who was overthrown by the CIA. They operated kind of underground under the Shah because of their political repression, but they were a very, very big political force, and they managed Soviet relations between Iran and the Shah's government and the Soviet Union, stuff like that. That was the Tudeh Party. They were kind of reformist. They were very large. Then there was another group called the Fedayeen, or the People's Fedayeen Guerrillas, and they were Maoists. They were a breakaway from the Communist Party, and they were in the countryside trying to wage guerrilla warfare. They were inspired by Mao, and they were inspired by Che Guevara and the Cuban Revolution, and they were the People's Fedayeen Guerrillas, and they were in the countryside trying to wage guerrilla warfare among the peasantry, which is what you did right back in those days. That's what, in China and other places, that's how communist revolutions tended to happen. There was a third communist party in Iran, and it was called the People's Holy Warriors, Mujahideen Khalq MEK, and it was led by Masoud Rajavi. And Masoud Rajavi was an individual who claimed to be a prophet. He was an Iranian communist who was also religious. He was a Muslim, and he claimed he was the reincarnation of Jesus and Lenin in one body. And he was brought to earth to usher in a global communist Muslim Islamic revolution. And his group engaged in terrorism and left adventurism. They assassinated a number of Americans. They kidnapped Americans and held them hostage. They were a crazy religious group in Iran that worshipped Masoud Rajavi as the second coming of, the combined reincarnation of Jesus and Lenin, and they engaged in suicide bombings and kidnappings and assassinations, etc. And they existed, and when the Islamic Revolution of Iran happened, they supported it because they were anti-imperialist and such, and they had a lot of members in the United States. Many of their members and supporters had fled from Iran to the United States, and so they, in the United States, there were a lot of Iranian students that were in Mujahideen Khalq. They had a lot of Americans that were members of them, and they did weird things. Their rallies in America, their signs would be in Farsi, so no Americans could read them. They would chant "Death to America" in Farsi in America, and that would confuse people. Apparently, they did have a big banner at one point. They marched through the streets of New York City. There was a rally in support of the Iranian Revolution in New York City, and they marched through the streets with this banner that said, "Fidel Castro is the greatest Muslim in history," which I think is funny. And they always just kind of looked weird to people. They were just kind of a weird religious communist group that engaged in terrorism in Iran, assassinations, kidnappings, etc. And technically they're not Muslims, because Muslims, you can't believe that anyone's a prophet. Muslims believe that Muhammad is the last prophet. So if you think that there's a new prophet, you're technically not Muslims. At that point, you become an apostate. Well, they believe that their founder, Masoud Rajavi, was a prophet, so they were apostates. So anyway, they were for the Islamic Revolution, and they were big supporters of it. But the leader of the Islamic Revolution was Khomeini, who was not a communist, who was a cleric. He came back, and he was the leader of it. They declared the Islamic Constitution. And there was a cleric who was a close friend of Khomeini's, who was very pro-communist and would meet with Mujahideen Khalq and the Tuda Party and the Fedayeen. And he was a cleric. He was an Islamic cleric who was an advisor to Khomeini, but he was known as the communist cleric, or the Red Shia, I think is what they called him. The Red Shia, meaning that he was Shia Muslim, but he was red, right? Shia, a lot of the top clerics, they wear a black turban, but it was like he was a red turban. He didn't literally wear a red turban, but they called him that, right? So that guy got fired. Khomeini made a big point. He said, no, we cannot have a combination of Islam and communism. We have nothing to do with communism, neither East nor West. So Khomeini fired that guy. So after Khomeini fired that cleric, I forget what his name was, then the Mujahideen Khalq went on a killing spree, and they blew up the Iranian parliament, and they killed 81 members of the parliament. Now, I want you to imagine, we're still flipping out 4 years later because a bunch of rednecks ran through the U.S. Capitol and farted in Nancy Pelosi's chair. But, their parliament building in Iran was blown up, and 81 elected parliamentarians, members of Congress, were killed. That's a pretty big deal. And they blew up the Iranian parliament building, and they killed 81 members of the parliament. The current supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, he can only move one of his arms. The reason he can only move one of his arms is because he was having a press conference, and a Mujahideen Khalq person showed up with their tape recorder. And it wasn't actually a tape recorder. It was a bomb, and it blew up and damaged the arm of the supreme leader, and he cannot move one of his arms. They are a very murderous, bloodthirsty organization, right? So obviously they were outlawed. Iraq invaded Iran, right? And they were outlawed for all their terrorism. And so they all moved to Iraq. And in Iraq, Saddam Hussein gave them military training, and they changed their name to the Iranian National Liberation Army, is what they called themselves. And Saddam Hussein airdropped them into Iran, and they razed villages, and they killed civilians, and they were like a fighting force for the Iraqis in the Iraq-Iran war. Really nasty people. So then after the Iraq-Iran war, Saddam Hussein set up like a part of Iraq that they got to live in. And they had this little city that was all theirs. And in this city, they engaged in torture. They would put nooses around people's necks and drag them, by nooses around their necks as a way of torturing them. They had summary executions. They had the death penalty in their village, where they would execute people all the time. And they had this little part of Iraq that was their little kingdom, where Masoud Rajavi was the boss, who said he was a prophet. And they tortured people, and they shot missiles into Iran. They would shoot missiles over the border into Iran and kill Iranians, and they were not nice people. And they would work for Saddam Hussein. And then when there was an uprising against Saddam Hussein by the Kurds, they sent the Mujahideen cult to go get killed for them. And, you know, they were just kind of this like crazy cult that Saddam Hussein used for, I don't know, for as his military fighting force, basically. So when the USA invaded Iraq, they bombed Iraq, and they actually bombed the place that the Mujahideen cult lived. And after the USA invaded Iraq, Masoud Rajavi, who's the prophet, has never been seen since then. Now, they claim he is still alive, but he's never been seen. And many people believe he was killed intentionally when the USA bombed Iraq, that they offed him. Regardless, his widow, Miriam Rajavi is now the leader of the group. And Miriam Rajavi lives in France now, and she calls herself the president of Iran, and she works for Israel, and she works with Israel and gets paid by Israel, and she is very good friends with a number of American, government officials, and they have a lot of money, and they are one of the main anti-Iran activist groups around the world. And they protest against Iran, and they support Israel, and they murdered Iranian nuclear scientists. They had their members go into Iran and murder Iranian nuclear scientists. They're just a terrorist cult, and they are whatever you want them to be. If you are a Muslim, they will tell you that they're Muslims. Oh, we're Muslims. We're just a Muslim group, and the Ayatollahs are fake Muslims, and we're true Muslims. If you're a communist, they'll tell you that they're a communist. Oh, we're communists. Yeah, we're communists, and the Ayatollahs are corrupt anti-communists, and we're the real communists. And if you are a Zionist, they'll say, oh, we're human rights activists from Iran. We are human rights activists. We just want freedom in Iran. Iran is a brutal dictatorship. And they're none of those things. They are a counter gang. They were a weird religious sect, that existed in Iran before the revolution, and they turned into a counter gang. I don't know what you want to call them. They're terrorists. They were designated terrorists by the American government. They were listed as terrorists, and they've murdered a number of Americans. They've murdered a number of Iranian government officials. They worked for Saddam Hussein. They were designated terrorists until Hillary Clinton delisted them in 2014. Hillary Clinton made them not terrorists. And they always say, well, that's because they've renounced violence. And that's a weird thing to say, because they have not renounced violence. When they murdered Iranian, when Israel helped them kill Iranian nuclear scientists, that was pretty violent. And they've been doing terrorism in Iran the whole time. The idea that they've renounced violence, that just isn't true. I mean, it's not true in any conceivable way. They're in France, they're in Albania, they're in New York City, Alabama. They're just a group of Iranian nut jobs. I don't know what you want to call them, that work for Israel sometimes, work for the CIA sometimes. They used to work for Saddam Hussein. They're hired guns, so to speak. They're a fanatical religious communist religious sect. And honestly, one of the things they've required all the members to divorce their spouses because being married is a distraction from the cause of violently overthrowing the Iranian government. And they are convinced that at some point they'll take over Iran, and that they'll be the leaders of Iran. But yeah, I mean, they're not good. And I mean, I don't know if internally they still think they're communists. They might. I don't know. I mean, they present themselves as Muslims to most of the world, but they're pro-Israel. So that's complicated, right? They're just, I don't know what you want to call them. They're just no good is what they are. So yeah. And they've threatened me, every year during the UN General Assembly, when the Iranian leader speaks, they have like a counter rally that's full of like Israelis and other people. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. I confronted them. I will show you this video. I confronted them and made them very angry. I confronted them in New York City when they were out in front of the UN. They were out there with all their umbrellas, and I confronted them. So I'll show you the video. I used to do stuff like this a lot. I don't do this as much anymore because I don't think it's very productive, but I did it. So yeah, at the building I used to work at, like, it was raining, but all the MEK supporters were out there with their umbrellas. So I decided to confront them.
Not bad.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So, why was the Mujahideen Khalq declared a terrorist organization by the United States Department?
I tell you, because Iranian government give them a lots of money and lots of effort, lots of free oil to put them in a terrorist list so they can.
And why did you work with Saddam Hussein?
We didn't work with Saddam Hussein.
You didn't work with Saddam Hussein.
No,
you
no,
weren't.
sir.
You weren't airdropped into Iran. The Iranian National Liberation Army never happened. Never happened. Oh, okay.
Who can have an airdrop when you don't have airdrop?
During the Iraq-Iran War, the Iranian National Liberation Army was airdropped into Iran, razed villages, slaughtered people from Iraq.
That's Saddam. You can talk to
Yes,
Saddam
who
about
sponsored
Saddam.
your organization
No,
for
that's
years. You killed Americans. You killed Americans. In the 1970s, under the Shah, you assassinated Americans. You guys are terrorists. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Go educate yourself. Don't tell me I'm a terrorist.
Our government shouldn't be working with you all. You're murderers and you're terrorists. You killed thousands of innocent Iranians. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You killed scientists, people that were just teaching classes on scientists. You work with Israel, you're murderers, you're terrorists, you killed Americans. Americans like me have been killed by your organization. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
So yeah, I confronted Mujahideen Khalq in New York City. I don't do stuff like that as much anymore. It's kind of, I was younger. I was angrier and younger, I guess. You know, maybe, I mean, sometimes that kind of thing is necessary, but whatever. But yeah, you asked about Mujahideen Khalq, and that was your answer. So the next Rumble rant is from Dot Green for Peace, Rachel in Georgia. She says, talk about imperialist methods for maintaining power. Do they impoverish the world with predatory loans, monopolistic control of products and energy? Well, the main thing is that it prevents countries from developing their own industries. You know, I mean, great example would be that, you know, Nigeria, right? Very wealthy oil producing country. But the Nigerians are very poor because the profits from the oil of Nigeria go to ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. They don't control their own natural resources. And, you know, the export of capital means that American oil companies control the oil of Nigeria. Another example is, you know, with the NAFTA is a great example, right? NAFTA, Mexico used to grow its own food. They've been growing their own food since before Christopher Columbus. But NAFTA went in there and they prevented Mexico. The NAFTA treaty, the North American Free Trade Agreement, made it illegal for Mexico to have protections for its own farming sector. And so American agribusiness was able to slip in products at a cheap rate and put all the Mexican farmers out of business, and now they buy their products from America. You know, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, gives development loans to impoverished countries, right? The World Bank and the IMF, they loan money to developing countries. But in order to get those loans, they have to let their economy be kind of dictated by the IMF. The IMF tells them how to run their economy, and often it tells them to gut their public sector. Bolivia sold off its state-run oil industry, its natural resources, cutting the public sector, etc., and getting rid of any trade protections. Protections for their industries is usually required in order to get the development loans, right? There's many examples of this, but the main thing is it's about preventing countries around the world from having their own economy so that they have to buy all of their products from Western corporations, the export of capital. Keeping countries in a state of dependency, keeping countries from developing their own economies, having the natural resources and economy of that country dominated by Western corporations. That is the main way they make their super profits. So I hope that was helpful. So now we're going to move to the 2 super chats that I've got. If anyone has any more super chats, by all means, send them in. I am here to answer your questions. Thoughts on Pavel Durov arrested in France? It's another one of these bullshit tech arrests, right? Right? Ross Ulbricht is not responsible for people selling drugs on Silk Road. He's not, right? The people who sold the drugs are responsible. People sell drugs on Facebook all the time and they don't jail Mark Zuckerberg. The mega upload guy, Kim.com, he is not responsible for people pirating movies. And in fact, he bent over backwards to give access to the Motion Picture Association of America to prevent people from pirating movies. But he's being extradited to the United States, and this is a similar thing. Do people do bad things on Telegram? Of course they do. Is that his fault? No, obviously it is not his fault. And this is a game that is played by the tech monopolies, and you'll notice it doesn't ever apply, right? Do people do criminal things on YouTube? Sure. Do they arrest Google execs? No. Do people do criminal things on Twitter? Yes. Do they arrest Elon Musk? No. Right? It's this game that they play, and this is the tech monopolies trying to ensure their monopolies. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the big platforms are all connected with the government. It's the same reason they're going after TikTok like crazy. Anything that's not part of their kind of government-facilitated monopoly gets targeted. And so I don't see this arrest of the Telegram guy as legitimate. I don't see it as legitimate at all. And I mean, Telegram, it's complicated, but overall, Telegram is a much better platform than, in terms of free speech than a lot of the other ones, and they don't control it. So I don't view it, I don't view it as a legitimate arrest. So there you go. And Johnny Spinoza says he's an innovationist. Me too. I'm also an innovationist. Good to meet you. But in all sincerity, folks, we're doing something really special with CPI. We're going to have a workshop coming up. So hope you get involved. I hope you make a morning message. We could really appreciate it if you would make a morning message. That would be really, really great. Gabby made a great morning message. I showed it to you all earlier. And every morning on the CPI YouTube channel, we have morning messages, and we have this special link where you can make your own morning message. So please, I am urging you, please, please, please go and record one right now. That would make my life easier, and it would help our organization. We need you engaged. We need you making morning messages. We need you engaging with people. So please do that. The link is right above. There we go. Oh, we got another super chat. I don't see these progressive channels having guests that will talk about how to effectively boycott. Well, Ronald, hey, that's an interesting question. All right. So I must say that part of the stereotype of an obnoxious leftist is they're boycotting 100 things, right? The save the whales thing. I don't shop at Walmart. Oh, I don't buy from that company. They're an evil corporation. I don't, right? And that, there are real boycotts. The Montgomery bus boycott. That was all the black people of Montgomery, Alabama didn't ride the bus for like a year, right? And, unions boycott and they protest out in front of the business. And, when their company's on strike, they got a picket line and they enforce a boycott. But one thing, years ago, I got so sick of boycotts that do nothing but make the person doing the boycotting feel good about themselves, right? And there's a lot of that. I buy fair trade coffee. Oh, I don't eat at McDonald's. And it is, is you going, I don't eat at McDonald's, they're an evil corporation. Does that stop McDonald's in any way? No. Right? If you want to effectively boycott, right? If you want to stop McDonald's, then what you should do is you should get teams of people to be out there in front of McDonald's with signs, don't eat here, and really boycott it. And if not, don't do it. I have no interest in boycotts that are done simply to make boycotters feel good about themselves. And on top of that, one of the problems is liberals, especially the obnoxious kind of degrowth liberals. A lot of them really do believe the problem with capitalism is that people are just not ethical consumers, right? People don't make ethical consumption choices. And if only people would all drive hybrid cars and or electric cars and would, only buy fair trade coffee and go vegan, everything would be fine. But people just aren't as moral as I am. I'm so that I don't like that stuff. Okay. So that's why, you're asking why I don't talk about effective boycotting. I almost cringe when I hear the word boycott. Now, to be fair, there are some boycotts that are very effective. But those, I almost, when somebody starts talking about boycott, I'm going to boycott, I almost go, oh boy. Look, I got to tell you, there are a lot of non sequiturs out there, right? One thing that I continue to see, and I just don't know what to do with these people, is there these people that are in search of the perfect third-party candidate, right? And I really don't get it. I do not get it, right? They are in search of the perfect third-party candidate. And they want to expose anyone who supported RFK because he's a Zionist, and they want to expose anybody who, and they're just like, if we could just find a third-party candidate who isn't bad on a couple issues or whatever, then they'll be fine. It's like, how does that matter? They're not going to win. You do realize that, right? So imagine that this perfect third-party candidate did emerge. They wouldn't win. Like, it's this weird thing. And I see people doing this, and it's like, they're mad at anyone who supports RFK. I don't support RFK, but they're mad at anyone who supports RFK because RFK is a Zionist, and they're mad. And it's like, so what if you find the perfect third-party candidate? Then what? Like, it's like they can't imagine politics beyond voting. They don't understand that at the end of the day, it's about the balance of forces. We have to build a mass movement, and there are no shortcuts. And look, we are guilty. We have relied on social media for way too long. We are guilty. We tried. That was a shortcut. There is no shortcut, and that shortcut will not come in the form of a Democratic Party candidate or a third-party candidate, and that shortcut will not come in the form of going viral on social media. There's no shortcut. We have to build a mass movement, and that requires hard work, and it requires meeting people and having tough conversations and getting people to learn ideas they've never heard before. It requires hard work, and we're doing that hard work. And Gabby and others have worked really, really hard getting names of people, and we're going to put on a workshop, and that workshop is aimed at new people to teach them these ideas, right? And that it is hard work to build a mass movement. It is not easy, but you just have to do it, right? And that there are too many people looking for a shortcut. If I just boycott this, no, right? If I just, find the perfect third-party candidate, no, there are no shortcuts. We have to build a mass movement, and that's not easy. But I committed a couple months ago, I committed to a year from now, July 12th and 13th, 2025, we are going to have a massive anti-imperialist rally in Chicago. We are going to have 400 people in Chicago for an all-day anti-imperialist rally in Chicago. We have never had 400 people ever at a CPI event. We've had over 200 before. We're going to do 400, and that is not going to be easy. But the reason I set this goal and the reason we are taking a year to do it is because we have to learn to do the hard work. There are no shortcuts. And we have to just, when we said out of the movement to the masses, we never really did it. We were on the internet. There was this other swamp that developed, and we have to just find new people from our school, our coworkers, classmates, people in our neighborhood, family members. We have to build a real mass movement. It's not easy. Not easy. But we have to do it. There is no substitute. We have to teach people these ideas. We have to just go to the masses. And it's hard because, you talk to 100 people and you get through to one person. That's hard, but you have to do it. You have to do it. And there is no excuse. And we just have to do it. And so we're learning to do it. And there's no immediate payout. It takes time, but we have to do it. Because if we don't do it, nothing else is going to be done. And we got to get out of our minds that there's a shortcut. No shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. You have to just learn to engage people, right? And I think that what we have is very special. I think when people like us, when people meet us, they like us. But we have to do it. 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 And we have built a very beautiful community. And when people stay engaged and when people come and be part of our events and workshops and all of that, they find it's very rewarding. I am so lucky that I got involved in this before social media was a thing, because I learned what it was like to be in a group. I was in communist groups. I was in the old groups that used to exist. It used to be there were no Facebook groups about communism. If you wanted to do communism, you had to go find a party. You had to go find a group. And so I found groups and joined them. And I learned, and I became so much of a better person because of it, right? I really, I learned to talk to people. I traveled around the world. I engaged with people. I became so much of a better person because I was in a group. And if you join a group, you can be a better person too. You can enhance your social skills and you will do better in school. You will do better in business. You will do better in social interactions. You'll have more friends. If you get involved in a real movement, not an online thing, a real movement, you will do better in life. You learn life skills by being in a movement, right? I learned sales, marketing by being in a movement, right? I learned to engage with people. I learned politics. I learned economics. I never in a million years would have studied economics. But I learned about economics by being in a movement, right? You become a better person. We are all on a journey of self-improvement. And that's what we're on. We're on a journey of self-improvement, and you will become better by being in a movement. And being in a movement means pushing the envelope, getting out of your comfort zone. It's easy to just sit on your computer, right? It's easy to just sit on your computer and listen to people. That's not what we need. That's not what we need. The way the internet works is you only hear people who agree with you, right? And you can go viral and it doesn't change anything, right? And the social media is rigged. And every dissident space, everyone, libertarian, conservative, left, whatever, they find a couple influencers who are not building a mass movement, and they bully and attack anyone who does, and that's how they control the space. And libertarianism is like that. Influencers in the libertarian spaces are toxic, and communism and socialism and leftism are like this. And I've been dealing with this for so long, right? And that this is how the government has managed to control these spaces. They find usually some rich kid, and they make the rich kid, oh, you're the king of libertarianism. Oh, you're the king of internet communism. Oh, you're the king. And then that person is usually not very smart and doesn't understand it, but they get boosted like crazy. And then they start targeting all the people that are actually building a real movement, right? And it stays online, and it gradually becomes less and less political over time. It becomes about this rich kid and how cool they are. And that is how they are controlling dissident politics right now. Well, if you settle for that, if you never go to something in real life, You're part of the problem. And I got to tell you, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just shy, or, well, Caleb, look, you got to just be part of it. You do. I mean, I don't, there's no way around it. It's not easy. You might be nervous. You might not know the right things to say to people. And that might be more true for you than others. I'm not trying to belittle any hardship or disability that you might have, but I'm telling you that you have to do it. Right? I mean, if you really want to change the world, you have to be part of a in real life movement. There is no excuse. There is no alternative. You need to join an in real life movement, and you will get better and you will improve. And I just want to say this. Right? The mental health industry, and it's funny because we have a question about healthcare here, right? So this actually fits, right? Thoughts on healthcare and innovationism. Mental health is supposed to be about finding people who, for whatever reason, can't. Right? They have depression and they can't. They have anxiety, they can't. They whatever, and helping them to say, "I can." That is what mental health is supposed to be, right? If you are sick, you go to the doctor and the doctor cures you of your sickness, and then you're not sick anymore. That is how mental health is supposed to work. Okay? And I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. So do not misinterpret what I'm saying here. No one should take any action based on what I'm saying. I have no medical qualifications to say this. I'm just telling you what I have observed, which is that modern mental health, it's not about people who say, "I can't," and they go to the therapist and they go to the psychiatrist or the psychologist or whatever, and the psychologist helps them to say, "I can." Instead, they're like, something's not right. I don't know what it is. And sometimes they are saying, "I can't." And then they go to the therapist or the psychologist or the mental health professional and they say, "You can't. And the reason you can't is because of blah, 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 blah. And here's all this stuff I'm going to sell you. And here's all this stuff we'll have your insurance company pay for that you need, that you didn't know you needed before, and you still can't." And I have seen that so many times with people I know from my personal life, people I know from activism, people I know from family and stuff like that. And that is criminal, right? Mental health is supposed to find people who say, "Look, I can't, I've got a problem." And you're supposed to work with the mental health industry, the mental health professionals, and then you're supposed to be able to do it. You're supposed to be able to do what you were unable to do, get over your hardships, etc. But modern mental health is about helping people understand that they can't. In some cases, when they thought they could, they were just having difficulty. And give them some expensive pills and give them some expensive treatment and sell them all kinds of expensive stuff, and they still can't. I have seen that so many times. And I've also seen people who've really benefited from mental health. And I've also seen people that are just legitimately, they just can't do it. And I sympathize with those people. I don't blame them. Right? Some people just can't do it, right? And they can't, right? And there are people that just legitimately can't. And, and they have had people work with them and help them, and they just can't, right? And I deeply sympathize with those people. But I'm telling you, right, that there is a big problem with modern psychology, in that it's not helping people get over their problems. It's just monetizing people's problems. And that is a problem. It's monetizing people's problems. It's turning people's problems into a moneymaker. And that is a really big problem. And because of that, right, a lot of people that get caught up in that, I'm just telling you, a lot of people that get caught up in that enter adulthood thinking they can't. And they can. And they can. I got to tell you, I have well, I don't know how much I want to say. I've had a lot of experiences in my life. A lot. Okay? I've been through a lot of different things. I've been in a lot of different places. And honestly, there was unethical things I was subjected to, and there were scary, difficult situations I was put in that I really benefited from. And I don't advocate doing unethical things to people, and I do not advocate putting people in scary situations. But I look back on my young adult life, and there were things that happened that were awful. But as a result of those things, I got my shit together. You know? I am actually thankful because I got my shit together because I was put into some very awful situations. And when you're in an awful situation, you suddenly realize you can. Right? It's kind of like, if you throw somebody in the water, they realize they can swim. And I'm not advocating taking random kids and just throwing them in the water, right? So I'm not advocating that. So it's complicated. But I'm telling you, there were times in my young adult life I thought I couldn't. And there were people around me telling me I couldn't. And then I got thrown into the water, figuratively, and I was like, oh, I can. And I'm very thankful for that. And I feel like that was God. I mean, who else could it have been? Right? But I was in situations where everyone around me was telling me, you can't, you can't, you can't. And I believed, I had internalized, you can't. And then I got thrown into the water and I was going to drown. And I realized I could swim. Okay. And, it's not like that for everybody. It's not. There are some people who legitimately cannot swim. And I'm not talking about actual water. I'm talking about life circumstances. There are some people who legitimately cannot swim. Right? And the problem isn't that people don't get thrown into the water. And the problem isn't that the people who just can't are not. The problem is that the modern mental health industry has been set up to monetize and facilitate people thinking they can't. And that is criminal. Okay? Maybe I sound like a Scientologist. I am not a Scientologist, but maybe I sound like one. Maybe I sound like somebody else. And I am not giving medical advice here. I am not a mental health professional. But I am telling you that what I have observed is I have observed a lot of people who have learned, they have developed a kind of learned helplessness. They have internalized a belief about themselves that is holding them back. And that is criminal. And I also want to say this. I want to say this. I work with a number of young people out there. And one thing I have seen so many times, I have seen this so many times, and in a way, I'm actually thankful for, well, I'm not going to get into my life situation. This was not my situation. I thought my situation might arguably have been worse in some ways, but actually it was probably better because it was not this. And I have seen this many times. You don't know how many people I know like this. People my age. I can count in terms of people I've known that have this life situation. We're talking at least 20 people. They are adults, my age, younger, older. They live at home with a toxic parent. Right? And they have a toxic parent who doesn't want them to go out on their own and likes having them there under their thumb. And that, you want to talk about a way to fuck up somebody's life. And I have seen so many young people my age who they're 30, they're 35, they're 28, they're 40, and they're still living at home. And the reason they're still living at home is because their abusive parent, subtly abusive parent, their narcissistic, selfish parent doesn't want them out on their own. And the parent is always putting them down. You're a loser. You don't have a job. I have to take care of you. But the parent, every time that child looks like they're going to move out on their own, the parent flips out and panics because they want the child, the adult child, right in that spot where they can tear them down and they'll have low self-esteem and they hold all the cards because they have the house. I have seen that so many times. And honestly, people who get stuck in that are really, you want to talk about people that are miserable, people that are toxic, and people who've done a lot of harm to me personally, out of jealousy, out of resentment. When that dynamic develops, right? Matthew has seen it a lot. That is the worst. And if you are in that situation, my heart goes out to you. I am thankful that I was never in that situation. Even though my relationship with my parents was very bad at one point, it's still not great. I was never in that situation, because in that situation, living with them has to kind of be tolerable. With me, once I was out of college, I was on my own, right? And there were times I didn't have enough food and it was bad, but I was out on my own. I had to go out and swim. But there are a lot of younger people I know who up into middle adulthood are living at home, and they've got a parent who sits there and goes, you're a loser, you're a screw up, you can't be out on your own, but doesn't really want them out on their own. Right? And tears down the young person's self-esteem and tells the young person constantly, why don't you go out on your own, you're a screw up, but doesn't really want them out on their own, but sabotages it every time because they like the power. They like having an adult child in the household that they can kick around, that they can control. And they're afraid of being lonely, right? They're afraid of being alone. I have seen this so many times. And I mean, that's kind of like that mental health industry that I'm telling you about, but it's worse. A lot of times it goes hand in hand with mental health stuff. Not always, but it's bad, right? And if you are in that kind of situation, I have not worked with people to get out of that situation enough to know what works, but I'm just telling you, if you can find any way to be out on your own, do it. Right? For your own mental state, for your own stability, both my cousins, it's sad. Yeah, you have to get out on your own, right? You have to get out on your own if you're in that situation, because that is a dead end. That is a dead end situation, what I'm describing here. If you want to be, and I'll tell you, some of the people who have turned on me the most viciously have been people that have, been in this state. And a lot of times it's because the parent who kind of runs them down all the time starts comparing them to me. Right. And that happens. And hey, I'm proud of what I do. I'm on TV. I have a job. But it's like, no one deserves to be run down. And on top of that, they want total control over their child. And if their child becomes my friend and is joining my group, they might go out on their own and get away from them. So, some of the people who've turned against CPI and become vicious to CPI are people that are in this situation. Look, this is very blatant. I could tell it was what was happening, right? The ones who attacked CPI and have called us a cult and all of that, their parents were scared they would get out on their own. They were scared that they would go join CPI and do CPI stuff and not be there to be their fail son or fail daughter to kick around. And that happened in a number of the instances. We've had people who turn against the group. That's why they turned against the group. And it's so sad. It's so sad. But, look, a long time ago, I realized that one of my mistakes is in the past, I have thought, I can rescue people. I can be the one that changes people's lives. No, people don't get rescued. They help themselves. And then when people help themselves, they're able to take other people's help. But you have to want to help yourself. And I'm telling you that too. If you are in a life situation you don't like, you have a job you don't like, you live somewhere you don't like, you don't like your life situation, you have to make a choice to get out of there. Once you make that choice that you are going to pursue every opportunity to get out of there, then people will be able to help you, right? But until you make that decision, until you decide, I am going to get out of the circumstances that I am in, you're going to be in those circumstances, right? And people won't be able to help you. And that is something I discovered a long time ago, is I cannot help people who do not want to be helped. And if people want to be helped, it will be very easy for me to help them. Right. And, I have seen a lot of people that are my age or younger they have a messed up life situation. I can't help you unless you decide you want to be helped. Right. And then if you decide you want to be helped, I shouldn't have to help you that much. I mean, you'll be able to run with things. But one thing I am done with in terms of organizing, and I don't chase after people. I don't. Right. I really don't. Look, working with me there's a lot of great opportunities that open up for you, right? If you really enjoy writing, if you really enjoy speaking, if you really enjoy, if you have aspirations to have a big, social media platform and stuff, I can help you, right? I can help you, but you have to want to take my help. And you have to really want to take my help. And a lot of people say they want this, but they don't really want it. They don't really want it. They look at what I have. They say, "Oh, I wish I had this many followers." I don't even have that big of. I got 35,000 followers on here. It's not a huge YouTube channel. But a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I wish I had the numbers that you have. I wish I, traveled like you do, whatever." Okay. That's great. But then I start to open doors for them and they flip out and then they attack me. Right? And that has happened so many times, where it's like someone says they wish they have what I have. So I open doors for them and start facilitating them starting to have their own career, and they don't get it immediately, and it doesn't come overnight, or they just don't have the confidence and they get out there and they feel embarrassed or whatever, and then they just turn on me and become my enemy. And that has happened so many times at this point, of people that I've opened doors for, people that I've tried to help, who just, they ain't got it. They ain't got it. Look, I don't know what more I can say about this, honestly, but this is where it gets weird. I am not a leftist, a standard leftist anymore, and I'm not a standard conservative. There's some truth in the Ayn Rand stuff. It's not true about capitalism. It's not true about the way the world is set up, but in everyday life, there is an element of truth in it. There are a lot of people who deal with the way that they deal with the fact that they don't like themselves is by becoming irrationally jealous. That's true, right? And that's why the Ayn Rand stuff is so effective. It pretends that the rich, that Bill Gates and all of them are the smart inventors who all their friends get jealous of them because they had a good idea and made some money. Well, that's not the reality, but that happens in everyday life a lot. Some people have drive and they go out and do things, and other people don't, but they want the benefit. And they don't understand. And this is another thing, right? Well, I don't know. This is a whole other thing I could go on. I'm not going to, but regardless, I'm just telling you, right, that if you're in that toxic situation, or you've got a toxic parent who, I would encourage you. I don't know what the best way to do it is, but I would encourage you to get out of that situation, because that is a dead end. And you have the right to your own dignity. You have the right to be an adult with their own home. You have the right to that for your own self-esteem, etc. Right? You have the right to that. And that's going to hold you back. So there you go. All right. How to make people believe in growth, make people believe in science, secular to democracy, humanity, materialism through innovation by virtue of art. I don't even know what you're getting at there, my friend. I don't know what that means. Believe in innovation and materialistic growth. Okay. I mean, that's what the whole opener was about. I don't know exactly what you mean there, but I do believe in growth, and I do believe in expansion, higher life expectancy, more comfortable life, larger population. I believe in growth. I am pro-growth. And we are pro-growth, and that is the essence. We are pro-humanity and we are pro-growth. Right? And we celebrate human creativity, and we are for a government that empowers people to become creative, empowers people to build, and pushes us toward a higher mode of production, a higher form of existence. That is what we are struggling for. And that's what innovationism is all about. And I can help you. And I can teach you what I know, and I can help you find a creative outlet and a way to be creative, and I can help you. And that's what I'm here to do. And if you want to take me up on it, be my guest. And if you don't want it, it's not for everybody. But I'm here because this is something I need to do, and I'm going to keep doing it. And so I want to tell you all once again how much I appreciate you and I love you, and how much what we are doing here is a collective effort. This is a dialectic back and forth between all of us. I appreciate all of you. And on that note, I will close this stream. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.